Welcome to financialexpress.com budget special series. Today we have with us Gaurav Mehndiratta from KPMG India, and he's going to throw light on what the defense sector can expect from Finance Minister Arun Jaitley this time. Hi Gaurav. Gaurav, in the backdrop of all this talk of defense modernization and surgical strikes, there's this whole stress on how defense allocation needs to be increased. So what is your take on that?
So if you see historically last few years defense allocation has been going up, so it's not neither surgical strike, we've been having issues, we've got friendly neighborhood. So it's been going up at compounded growth rate of around 10%. So I think you may want to expect that that's the way the budget's going to be, going forward this year as well. But where, we need to look at in a different ways, take the Chinese example, because, today if you look at India's defense budget is 40% capital and 60% is revenue budget. China is going the other way. So China is reducing its revenue budget, and because as everyone knows, in the future the warfares are not going to be on land. They're going to be fought with technology, and that's really the difference Chinese are bringing about. And I think India needs to look at in that context, and therefore increase that percentage of capital allocation beyond the 40%, which historically has been there.
Focus on technology.
Focus on technology.
Okay. But what are the industry's expectations from the finance minister?
So the industry expectation, before I get into that, I think it's important to analyze where the trend of procurement in the past. So as we all know, India is in fact the largest importer in the world of defense equipment. Since the new government, or since the Modi government's come in, now it's not new anymore, they've been talking about Make in India, especially from the perspective of defense is one of the key areas, and rightfully so.
Of course.
And therefore, the last few years policy has also moved towards that direction.
Right.
So last year, in mid of last year, when at the Def Expo in Goa, the revised DPP was announced, they gave an impetus to Make in India project. So in fact, out of the 6 schemes in which the government can procure, Buy and Make Indian was given the first priority. Having said that, I think what the government will have to see is that you may want to give a preference for something to an Indian company, but Indian companies don't really have the technology or even the commitment to investment to make the investment. So I think that's something. There needs to be some policy measures which need to come around that.
There has to be assurance of orders, I guess.
Correct. And exactly. And while for smaller equipments that has started happening, small radar systems and others, that started happening, and where Indian companies are collaborating with foreign OEMs and getting that done. But for larger projects, I think that's not going to happen unless there are policy amendments.
Right.
And let me break it down into 2. So it needs to be one key thing is getting the investments. Second key thing is getting technology. I mean, these are the 2 key parts from a defense manufacturing standpoint. So if I talk about investments, so if you look at local investments, you look at foreign investments. So let's go to the foreign investments first. Earlier, the FDI guidelines, as you may know, was 26%.
Right.
And it was under the approval route, so even a $1 investment required approval. This government's come in, made some changes, made it to 49. That was a good move, and made it automatic. So that's another, ease of doing business, as we call it. However, if you see, there is nothing much on the ground. There is not significant investment vis-a-vis what we were getting as 26%. Answer is very clear, because you need majority control. The foreign investors need majority control if they were to come down to India. So, and in the last couple of budgets, we're seeing this government's making announcements towards FDI reforms as well. So, the industry actually, especially from a foreign investor standpoint, if you see, they are expecting that there might be some announcements, and maybe it surprises them right now, but there are some expectations at the ground.
With FDI at 49% and 51%, say that 2% extra that you're saying the industry wants, there is this whole debate around, it's defense, it's national security. Should you allow a foreign company to come in, have a majority stake? So how does industry negate that kind of argument?
So it's a very simple argument that it's today you're procuring.
Right.
So anyway, you're procuring from overseas.
Yes.
So so assuming that India goes at war, we'll be better off having some production facility here owned by a foreign company than having it. And other sensitive today, telecommunication I would say is more sensitive than defense manufacturing, because that controls a lot of data transfer. Now that is under more or less beyond 49%. So I think that is an argument which I think really doesn't sell in my view and view of a lot of people.
Okay, so you think that 51% is a minimum that they should look at?
Correct, because most of the countries, if you look at defense, there is a control from their governments that on the exports that you can do, on the technology transfer that you can do, and doing a technology transfer to a subsidiary where they don't have any control. Is something that you can also imagine. It's very difficult for those governments to allow that technology transfer to come in. Definitely. So that's really where the whole debate is. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned Make in India and the new defense procurement policy. There is also this strategic partnership model that is in works.
Yeah.
So how do you see the entire Make in India defense roadmap work coming up in the next 5 years, and what else needs to be done from the government?
Correct. So I think a very good point. I think one, there was a committee set up when Mr. Parrikar came into the office. He set up the Dhirendra Singh committee. They came up with this idea of strategic partners. They said that rather than if we were to really make in India, and these large platforms require a huge amount of investment, why don't we have one company per platform?
Okay.
Who will be committed that they will get the orders. At the back end, they can tie up with any foreign company who has the requisite technology, but front end, they'll be the front end, so that they can make the investment. They know there's going to be an order.
Right.
So it's a noble thought. There's nothing wrong with it, but then it's something that is taking huge amount of time for the government. If you recollect, the DPP came in and there were 2 sections to the DPP. The third section, which is strategic partners, still missing, and it is going through a lot of debate within the ministry by a lot of Indian companies, because some people who have invested in multiple areas may end up losing all their investments that they made in areas that they will not be strategic partners for. So that's one of the concerns. Number 2, the concern is that companies who have not yet come into the fray might feel that it's you're giving a monopolistic it's a monopolistic situation. You're giving everything to one company, and which is going to make a lot of money out of it. So that's really the debate. The idea is novel, but in my view, whatever it is, I think the decision needs to be taken faster now, because it's been two years that we've been talking about it. The decision needs to come, whether we're going this route, we're not going this route, and if.
But even with this route, with all these problems that you're saying, that there may be issues on monopoly and stuff like that, is there another alternate that you can suggest, which is like a midway between the two?
So the midway could be that you break the platforms down into multiple pieces, and have not one but 2 or 3 people come down to compete with it. So one platform has been broken into 2 parts or 3 parts, and those 3 parts further you'll have 2 or 3 companies who are given the mandate that you could potentially come in and get the orders. So at least you get the competition going. It's not a big piece going to one. So healthy competition is required. Otherwise, it'll go in a different direction. Number 2, I think from a budget, like we speak in the budget, one of the things is the fiscal reform, and which is where, while the government's going from taking away all the exemptions and going and reducing the tax rates, for making such huge investments and bringing in such technology, I think the government should look at defense in a very different light, because here the gestation period is really long, because any order to get executed takes tens of years and a lot of years. So I think they could potentially look at introducing a tax holiday in any form. They did it for telecommunication, it was done for other industries, infrastructure. At some point when that needed to pick up, I think it's high time that
introduce
tax benefits. Another area that we practically seen is that a lot of deals today come with an offset obligation,
right.
or which are going to the foreign companies, or they come with obligations of make in India. I mean, part of it should be made in India. Now there are a lot of issues when you actually implement that. So to give you an example, a foreign company, let's say A, gets an order, and they have to do 30% offsets. Now these do 70% overseas, and this is a tested, this is a case which a lot of companies are facing. And let's assume they choose an Indian partner, and then they send those equipments down to India, and the Indian partner does the balance 30% and gives the final product to the MOD. Unfortunately, there are so many tax issues with that, and therefore that model is really not being followed. And in fact, the Dharendra Singh committee report also, when it came out, has recommended the government to look into this issue, because that's a huge issue. Right. And therefore what is happening is either the companies are getting this work done and exporting it back and then re-importing it to India, or actually buying just minimal amount of components and just meeting their offset obligation, rather than giving a big chunk to India, because otherwise it hurts their pockets. So I think giving a deemed export benefits in these kind of cases could also be something that one could potentially look at or expect might come in.
Anything else that the government can do for the offsets policy?
Yeah, there's one more thing, and a very interesting discussion which is doing the rounds, and that is the government is realized the fact that the $15 billion worth of offsets that seems to have been already signed and which has to be executed over the next few years is not going to happen. So one of the ways that the government is thinking is that, can part of that get executed by investment into a fund which the government will manage, and that fund will then make investments into whether it's R&D or so as to speak, in some of these, either if these are these strategic partners making those investments, giving those grants through those funds, or the DPSUs or the research organization, DRDO and stuff, could benefit from that. Now that's one of the ideas which will not only help the country because you're investing that money in research and development, also helps the foreign OEM, because they're putting part of their obligation gets met.
Easily gets met.
Yeah.
But doesn't that discourage them from investing themselves?
Yeah, so that's why I've said that even the philosophy of this fund is doing only part. So it could be 25% of your obligation goes here, 75% you still do it. So you are, in some sense, you have skin in the game, and some sense you're getting away by paying this 25%.
Great. In terms of ease of doing business, I mean, as you said, a lot has been done and a lot of steps you've already recommended, but is there anything additional that the government can still do to at least get your foreign defense manufacturers on board and fast?
Yeah, so I think this is a discussion not only from a defense standpoint, but otherwise also we've been talking about a one-day company, but it takes multiple, give you an example, a small project office, if you win a contract, you have to open a project office, was taking actually 2 years to set up. So that's got streamlined a bit, but still would take at least 6 to 8 months. Right. So those kind of issues are, to start with. Number two, timelines to start off by, getting the industrial license, it takes a huge amount of time. But I think the biggest issue is that the clarity in terms of what the procurement policy says is not very, unfortunately, not very clear. So a lot of people struggle with that. And number three is more on a practical side. I think the MOD needs to staff a lot more people in their departments to really handle this if they want to do it well. Today they're pretty understaffed as well.
Okay, one last question. The Prime Minister wants India to be an exporter of defense equipment, and we are still struggling with manufacturing a lot of these defense equipment. development, as we just spoke in our discussion. So do you think that it's a realistic dream? And if yes, and if we move in the direction that we hope to, then how soon can that start happening?
Yeah, so I think, I would put it into two buckets today. I will break it into the technology part and the manufacturing part. So I think we are very good in technology otherwise, and I think if we were to get into some of our larger IT companies were get into this fray by partnering well with the global organizations and getting some part of the work, which can be quickly done, because you don't need licenses, you don't need some bit of that. So I think that could be phase one, and I think that could potentially happen. The part which requires technology development. But if you were to talk about manufacturing, I have a feeling that it's going to take much longer than the 7-8 year horizon that even Prime Minister Modi is looking at, because it's the gestation period is huge and the challenges are huge. We're not even started seeing 1% of what is expected out of Make in India to even cater domestically. Forget about exporting out right now. So I think that dream will take some more time to come.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Gaurav. Thanks a lot. We really hope that Finance Minister Arun Jaitley allocates a larger chunk to the defense sector, and we hope to see greater modernization going ahead. But for all budget-related updates, don't forget to log on to financialexpress.com.